all. So this is Arun from Chesslang team. Okay, if you haven't heard about Chesslang before, so we create online platforms for specifically designed for chess coaches across the world. We have presence in about 60 countries as we speak. To know more about us, you can actually go to chesslang.com. Yeah, right. So over a year ago, we started a group in Facebook called 10x Chess Coach. To bring together chess coaches from around the world. We share ideas and for experimentation, just to make the overall coaching experience better. Okay, now we are moving to the next step. So we've started this series of having videos where we bring in eminent coaches from across the world to share their wisdom with us. Right? It's an honor and privilege for us at Chesslang today. You have Mr. Magesh Chandran with us. Most of you know him anyway, but still I have a small intro about him. So he's originally from Tamil Nadu, India. Again, he's currently a successful coach in the United States. He achieved his Grandmaster title way back in 2006, right? He has had many stellar performances in his career. He was a former Asian Junior champion. He was joint winner once and winner once in Philadelphia Open, and more recently he also won the prestigious Hastings. So hi Mahesh, glad to have you here.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, thanks for the kind words. My stellar performances have been like long time ago, but yeah, Hastings is a nice. It was a fun tournament for me to win something after a long time. Yeah, it was good, but yeah, I'm glad to be here. Excited.
Right. So start off on that note. I mean, so you've successfully managed to be a player and also coaching for quite some time in the United States right now. So just want to hear from you, how has your life changed, and how do you keep yourself focused on both aspects at the same time?
Well, I have to say my profession is teaching more than playing anymore. I don't know if I can call myself a chess player as much. So I'm actually a chess teacher. Yeah. So I mean, gradually this happens for any chess teacher. I think this is the case because I make a living out of teaching. So that's what it is. That's my profession, and I consider that as a more important thing. But I do like to play mainly because I want to stay a little more grounded and a little more grounded in the sense I want to be connected with my students. Because one thing I noticed at some point is after a few years, when you don't play, you don't really relate too much to what happens over the board, right? I mean, you kind of forget about it. Mm-hmm. So my main goal at this point to play, of course, I don't have any huge aspirations. I would still like to play well and do well, but it's mainly to stay connected. Sometimes I go to a game and it's like the most obvious move, I blunder, and I come back and I have no explanation, and I'm actually at this point more relatable to my students. I share it with my students, and when they come back and tell me, listen, I just did something, I'm still maybe able to understand and relate to it rather than say, wait, can't you see this move? Kind of a thing, right? Yeah. So that's my biggest motivation to play. But otherwise, I still, of course, enjoy playing in general. So that's where I am.
Yeah, so it mostly helps you to stay relevant to the current. Yeah.
Exactly, and also enjoy with my students when they see me blunder. They're extremely happy. They're like, "Oh, my coach blundered something." It's like,
right.
That's the fun part. Yeah.
So in your view, Mahesh, so is it like really required to be a strong or regular player in tournaments to be a chess coach? What do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think, in fact, teaching is completely different from playing. So I think this is the case in most places. You take any sport or anything, in fact, you can be a really good expert in the field, but to teach that to someone else is a very different story. So I don't think playing level and teaching level are the same. Unfortunately, we don't have any clear standards right now, so we still use playing standards. For example, if somebody wants to hire a good coach, I think they still go by the level of play as their first marker, which is fine because we don't have a clear standard or a rating for coaches, right? So, yeah. So, I mean, I would personally as a teacher, what's more important is to be able to communicate and to actually explain something to a student. That's the real talent, right? I might know a lot more, but if I don't have the skill to communicate it to a certain group, that's another thing, right? Relating to your student to say, okay, this is the level of understanding that they have. and I actually need to communicate to that level in an understandable way. So I would say it's a completely different skill set.
So good to hear
Yeah.
that. I mean, so yeah. Right. So just wanted to ask you this. So like when we started playing chess, in the late 90s, probably early 90s as well, coaching always meant you just go to the academy and then you spend time. There used to be huge books that, we used to read about. I mean, we never really kept track of time. It just went on like that. So I think nowadays things have, changed. So how do you see coaching as a profession, evolve over the years, last 20, 15, 20 years?
Well, I see a huge change. You're right. I think coaching in general in all fields have gotten so much better. I mean, like tennis or other things, you can see that technology is playing a huge role in general. But I think the biggest difference is there's no one-dimensional approach anymore. Like you said, there was like probably a very strict method of coaching, and you follow it or you don't before. But now I think it's a lot more flexible. The simplest example, the first kind of culture shock for me was between the last generation and this generation was I just noticed that students have multiple coaches.
Okay.
And this was the first thing I was like, okay, no, this is not right. You cannot do that. You're supposed to just go to one coach and stick to one coach all the time. And then I realized actually a lot of students I started finding that they have multiple coaches. But the thing then I realized is, okay, it's maybe not so bad to have multiple coaches as long as they're coordinated, right? As long as the content is coordinated, you can actually learn from different people because it's different perspectives. So, I mean, there are tiny things like this. I think coaching has evolved a lot. Now, I think we have reached a point, like I said, at least from my personal experience, there is no one rule that fits all. It's just not there. I think everybody is extremely different. And also, the second thing is, as a coach, I've also realized that my limitations are based on my personal experiences, right? I like to do a few things, and that's how I became a good player. So initially, when I started as a coach, I was very limited to that idea to say, oh, you know what, this is how you should approach it because that helped me, right? But as you grow and as you teach, I feel like now there's a huge world of possibilities. I think everybody has their own style, and the technology making everybody reach everyone. I mean, I think most students now know they can reach online coaches everywhere in the world. So yeah, I think it's completely different from what used to be 20 years ago. For the better.
It's a nice point you mentioned. I mean, gone are the days when people limit themselves to one coach or something. Yeah. Just a word to our viewers, in case you want to ask us any questions, you can mention the YouTube comment section. Right. So on that note, we have some questions that we have from, and this team fits there perfectly. Right. So nowadays, group online as well as offline group classes have become popular, and it's very natural that players of different levels come together. They enroll for classes. So we have a question from Mr. Jeff in the US. So how do you teach groups of children at different levels? Like, how do you manage this?
I think it's not so easy to have a big group. Over the years, I've realized it's better to have specific rating target groups. It's actually it is difficult. if you have a bigger group and the rating range is widening more and more, I think the teaching becomes more and more difficult. Basically it is you cater to this end of the spectrum or that end of the spectrum. You cannot stay in the middle at that point, because what will happen is, let's say if the rating group is, let's say, 1,000 points, if you stay in the middle, you might make it irrelevant for too many people. So typically what coaches do is, if the rating gap becomes bigger, then usually you cater to the top group, because you work with the top group. The lower group might not understand everything, but it's still a learning experience in some sense. They might pick things here and there, and they will still, and also they might feel, motivated or more inspired to be with a higher group, to learn a tougher lesson. So there are still positives to look forward to. But let's say if you're in a big group and you cater to the smaller level, then you completely lose the top group. So anyone above that who's finding it too easy, they're not finding it challenging. So basically, to say it, if you want to swing one way or the other, you swing to the side of more challenge, not less challenge. right? You can push them harder or less. But in general, you do want to limit the groups to a certain rating range, so you can teach relevant topics for that rating range. That's actually the best part of the learning experience, right? Because they really need to learn a few things for their level. You cannot stay relevant if the group widens too much. In fact, we were doing this launching this new pro chess training, and one of the main discussions as us coaches with Ramesh and Ganguly, and when we talk about it, that's the main thing. We want rating targets.
Okay.
We cannot work on specific groups if the rating is like too wide. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, this problem has become, in fact, more profound, in recent years, because previously the ratings used to start at a particular level. Now that it's inflated and right? So when you talk about range, when you were mentioning about ranges, so what do you think is some ideal range where you can actually segment students accordingly?
Yeah, in our academy, in Kings and Queens Chess Academy, that's the one that we run in US, and we currently have locations in New Jersey and North Carolina. And because of the COVID, of course, all the classes are online. But in our academy, we segment about 300 points in USCF.
Oh.
So we keep each rating group for about 300 points, and then maybe in the higher group, I would say roughly 300. It's very difficult to have an exact number. I think you could do 300, 400, 200. I mean, I really don't see how I can. Anyone can be extremely specific and say exactly the right number. It's very difficult, I think.
Okay.
But overall, 300 seems to be a good number for us to create the split. So we set our number on that limit.
Yeah, nicely put. I mean, it is an industry now. It will evolve over a period of time, so to say. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So on these lines, we had another question from a coach in Bangalore. So, like, how do you manage, what to teach, right? Whether you have a set curriculum or, based on the students, you decide on, what to take during the classes.
Depending on the type of classes you teach, you do need some tools. If you're doing one-on-one, actually, no matter what you're doing, I think having a set curriculum is a good idea in general. I think you do need some structure, because structure makes it easy, right? It's not that, there are lots of benefits of not having a structure. I've had lots of close friends that I talk to who talk about it from the other side too, because when you have some, you kind of have some creativity going on. When you walk into a class, you teach something and they learn something, they ask question, and you go along those lines. It's also a fun, fascinating class. But to me, in my experience, I feel like the structure helps students more.
Okay.
There are any good thing you do, there could be some downsides. Like I said, the creativity can be challenged a little bit if you have too much of a regimented structure. But I think overall, it will still help the students, because there will be some understanding of what is going on and what is the requirement from them, right? To me, this structure really helps students grow, whether you do group classes or one-on-one classes. Let's say this month, you say, this whole month, I'm going to work on this particular topic, right? And then you follow up one after another, so you can build on that. You can give homeworks on that. So this will definitely help. Instead of saying, let's say, this whole month I teach multiple things, the students are benefiting. It's great. They're sitting with you on a class, you're teaching something, and they're still going to learn a lot from the class. But I feel like structure would be the key that's going to make your students' life easier.
Okay. So you're saying a little bit of design instead of leaving too much to chance. That's a better way to go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So on that note, we'll take another question. So we were talking about how online classes have gathered more prevalence in the coming times, right? So there's always this counter question, it was so natural that for a growing chess player, we used to have this habit of reading books, studying classics for a long period of time. It's not often that you have class, so the frequency of class also is vastly different these days, right? So we have a question where again from Jeff. So how do you actually boost kids' interest in studying GM games or classics, basically?
Classic master games. Yeah, this is a very tough question, because there's no easy answer. And generally, with my experience, because what I can relate to, probably you can relate to, I don't know, when you were studying, there are two things I found hard, right? One was actually analyzing my own games. This was one of the most difficult challenges for me when I was growing up.
Okay.
I found it extremely difficult. The second thing was this studying master games. I mean, I was happy to see the current events. I was like, oh, Anand is playing here. This is happening. That's happening. But for me to really go, like, just study master games, like just keep watching the games kind of thing. I know some friends who just love to do that.
Okay.
It's just that I was struggling with it. So here, you're absolutely right. I think kids grow up in a different kind of environment. It's so much easier for them to maybe do some tactics or play some games, or maybe have very specific training where, so instead of any place where there is some goal, right, it's easier for them to do, right? So they say a master game, I cannot go and exactly ask them, right, or give them a puzzle on that. So that kind of learning is always going to be difficult. And one thing I do is, like in our group classes and stuff, we give bonus points for anyone who gives current information. Like, I want them to know what's going on. So I say, okay, you know what, there are websites, Chess24, chess.com, ChessBase, they all do a great job. So you go and read some articles, watch some videos. So what we do is like incentivize them a little bit. So someone comes back and tells me, this week, this tournament happened, this person won or added a game. So we're like, okay, the bonus points. So it's a little bit of bribing there, but the incentive is what I drive a little bit. But in general, my idea is after they reach a threshold, maybe they'll just run off their own. But until then, they need the push. You kind of push them, incentivize them, you get them to the point. Once they reach a certain point, maybe they will just enjoy it, right? Like to some extent, like we do. I mean, there's no incentive for us to go and check. Like I said, I'm not really trying to be 2,700 or anything at this point, or 2,600. So, but I just like to watch the games, right? I like to see what's going on and stuff like that. So hopefully they will reach that threshold, and then they'll just love it, and then they'll just study it.
It's nicely put, because I mean, I think chess as a game, takes some bit of time, and so. But yeah, so when you say this, the one question comes to my mind, like, how do you say kids obviously like start very early these days coming to coaching, right? So as a coach, right, how do you actually know that this kid is interested in chess? I mean, so your thoughts on this?
I think luckily, most of the kids who walk through the door are pretty interested. I think that's the lucky aspect in general. There are occasionally a few kids you can just kind of tell because they just don't want to be there. they're forced to sit there. I remember reading an article in which Anand replied once, and it stuck to me. In the last few years, he was asking, it's kind of against, in some sense, the incentive thing. He's like, why can't we? So I think the discussion idea was how to make chess more fun. Yeah. So, and he was having some discussion. I don't remember who it was with. I don't remember what the tournament was. I just remember reading this part. Maybe it was with Kramnik, I don't know. But so the idea was how to make chess more fun in general. And Anand's answer or question in some sense was, why can't chess be fun as chess? Right? Isn't chess just fun? Like, aren't kids just going to be fascinated to just take up chess and play chess? Do we need it to be, do we need to dress it up more? Is it even required? So I think the part of it just being fun, it's a very tricky thing, right? You most of the kids, like I said, they come in, they enjoy playing. They would just love to play, right? You set them up with the game, they kind of get into it, they want to win, there are some motivations in there. And sometimes you will find difficulty in getting them to work. And I have realized that's actually a little natural. Kids are sometimes, more distracted by other things that are more fun, right? It's not that they don't like chess, they like chess, but they like maybe, playing outside, running around, throwing a ball as more, more fun, or playing video games. It's tough to sometimes compete like that. But overall, I think that if they get to a point where they start playing tournaments, I feel they start going. They start, again, this is the threshold, right? So we have some kids who do classes, but if they don't get to a competitive level, then that's not going to drive in itself. And at that point, I feel like they're losing interest. They're sitting in class, they're learning, but the problem is there's no reinforcement, right? you have to have some goal, and that's how humans we are wired, right? We have to go and win something for us to say, okay, I learned this, I did this, right? So you're learning and you're not doing much is going to be tricky. Actually, the funny thing is, having said that, I do have some students who do classes, who have been doing classes for like 2-3 years, and they never play tournaments. So it's the strangest thing. I've talked to the kids, I've talked to the parents, like, you know what, you have to play some tournaments. And the kid loves the class.
Okay.
They don't want to stop the class, but to keep learning chess, and but just doesn't want to compete. Sometimes it's because they're afraid. Sometimes it's like schedule or something else. But overall, to keep the interest going, they have to play tournaments. Otherwise, they're eventually going to drop off. And anyone who's playing tournaments generally are good enough in the class. They're just like kind of there. Yeah, they're in a fun place.
It's an but I think some of our coaches also facing this problem. In fact, one of them from Bangalore had asked us, like, how do you make them play tournaments? How do you, get them started in playing tournaments as such?
Yeah, I think incentives is what it is, and stay in touch with the students and the parents, and also probably trying to understand their schedule, because, like I said, there's no one rule that fits all. So I've noticed some kids, just don't have the time. I have some students who absolutely cannot even put 1 hour during the week. The only time that they have is during weekends. So what happens is, if I pressurize them to do things, right, instead of actually becoming stronger or spending more time, they will actually end up breaking, because you basically, the answer is you have to understand your student's schedule, their life, their situation, because it's not that they get to play 3 tournaments or 5 tournaments, or they get to do 10 hours or something like that, right? So again, there is no one rule that fits for all. It just depends. So if your student is able to do only once a month, you try to work around and make that one tournament very clear, right? Give them to say, okay, this tournament, I know you're doing baseball, or whatever other activities that you're doing, and you could schedule this in, right? Let's try to go for this, and start with that, right? I would say start slowly, particularly the student is having trouble accepting. The second thing could be, like I said, it's maybe possible that they're just low on confidence. I've noticed that to be a big factor. When students outright refuse to play tournaments, it's usually that reason. They just are afraid. They don't want to lose, and they're low on confidence. They think that if they go play the games, they're going to lose the game. So I think the confidence booster is a very slow process. Yeah, you just slowly build them. You just, in class, give them. And sometimes I say, depending on where your student is, that's how you even set up the class, right? Like, you can go really, really challenging for someone who doesn't have confidence issues. If someone is having confidence issues, you start slow. You give them 10 positions or something, but then they're easy. They solve it. Before you build them up to difficult ones, every class you do that. Yeah. Every game you talk about it. You have to build them up very slowly. That's the path to convincing them, saying, listen, you're good. You can go try. You might win or lose. It doesn't matter. You're a good player. You can just go play, right? Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Biggest issue, I think, because chess-wise, right, you can work on things. It's not very difficult, right? If you see that they're weak in endgames, you can work on endgames. You see they're weak on calculation, you can work on calculation. So they're all very clear path to fixing the problems. But if somebody comes in and they don't have confidence, it's a very slow and difficult process, and there's no easy way to fix it at all, because it can be even outside the chess world. Something that's outside the chess world might be affecting their confidence and creating low self-esteem. Right? In school, they might be getting that issue. So it's. I think you're breaking off a little bit. I don't know.
Saying anything.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay. So yeah, your video was patching up. So that's okay. So yeah, I think confidence is a tough one. I still have situations where very good players. It's still a work in progress.
Okay. So on that note, so how do you handle like difficult students? Let's say you give them a homework or some, mate in one or combinations to do, and they just don't do it. Like, I'm sure have you faced situations like that?
Yeah, you mean to say someone who just doesn't want to work? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
But they still just don't want to work. So.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is, my job is to make sure that I really tell the student or the parent what it is it's required to reach somewhere, right? And to some extent push the student to get there. But after a point, it is, it is the student's responsibility in some sense, right? I mean, to some extent, you can do that. My dad always used to say this when I was growing up. I used to hate it when he actually said it. Now, as we all grow up, we sometimes relate more, right? So I relate to my dad's thing. So he used to say you can take a horse to the pond, and you can push the head close to the pond. You can never make it drink the water, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. You can do all the things that is required, but in the end, you still have to give some room for the student to still learn and do things. So the good news again is I feel most of them are not like that, right? If someone is behaving like that, there's actually a different issue, right? It's not necessarily that they don't want to learn. It's just that something is bothering, because most students walk in, they have some incentive. They want to do well in class. We are all like humans. We have peer pressure, right? There are 10 kids in class, they want to do well. They want to go to the next tournament with a trophy, right? You give points and give prizes. They want to get some prizes and they want to answer some questions. So very rarely they're going to go against this incentive. And if they're doing this, the issue is usually something else. So I guess it will come back to patience and trying to figure that out, talking to the student to see what is going on and why the issues are, addressing with the parents to see what is going on. It's much easier to do that when it's a one-on-one session and you're talking to, but in a group kind of setting, it's a little bit more challenging. But one-on-one, that's what I would say, talk to the student, talk to the parent, because very likely that something else is going on in their life that they want to rebel against.
Correct. When you mentioned this, I remember one story about you that I've heard multiple times in your academy, in our academy, right? So viewers, just to get a sense of how good Mahesh was as a student, when he was in the early days. If I may take a few minutes to say that. So, so I think you will remember this. So you guys were having lunch and you got an instruction that you need to finish everything that you bought for lunch, right? And so everyone was finished in about 30 minutes, and there's one person who was still continuing to finish, trying to finish that, right? And after a point of time when the coach came and saw, Mahesh, what are you doing? And so I finished everything as you said, but it's just that this inedible part of the drumstick that I'm unable to finish, and I'm trying, I think that dedication, sincerity, and the respect as such that you had for the coach has brought you where you are.
I actually thought, I'm very happy to hear you have a positive tone to the story.
Yeah.
But by the way, just to read, so it was Hariharan sir, right? Yeah. We all worked under Hariharan. So I remember you being very young and your sister coming to the classes, and I remember it was a lot of fun, and it was a great atmosphere. Actually, talk about a learning atmosphere. Hariharan sir's house was the best.
Yeah.
I mean, the books, and also I recently wrote this in an article as well. Kind of leading by example, yeah. So I think the biggest thing as a coach, which I feel, is that your students are going to learn more by what they see in you, rather than what you tell them, right? So if you go in and play a certain way, if you go in and do a certain thing, they're going to see these things and they're going to be influenced by that. So Hariharan sir had a huge influence for me, right? The kind of, you probably are very familiar with the lifestyle and the coaching and everything. So it was like, everybody did their own job, own chores, right? The whole family, the way they lived was more of a model to me, right? So some things don't click right away, right? It takes time, but then you do really know that some things influence you there for a long time. Yeah. And the learning environment that he created was, to me, just unbelievable. And again, we were just lucky to be there and work with him. But coming back to your incident, I remember Sriram. I think it was Sriram. I haven't been in touch with him for a while, but he was there, and I was so silly that I'd never had drumstick in my life, that I was trying to follow it the whole time. And there were instructions that particular day for me to just make sure I finish the food because I don't mess it up. Like I was leaving food out before, so I would mostly put this incident as me being silly rather than dedicated. I think it's tough to take credit like that. But yeah.
For viewers, he is just being humble. I still don't buy it, but anyway. So, right. So just that was on the lighter side. So few quick questions. You can answer however you want. Like, so what are the two, three things that a coach really needs to make a successful coach? Yeah, qualities. Say.
Well, I think again it's very tough to nail it down. Probably there are so many things, but I think I mentioned a few already. First thing is you need to have patience to teach. Like I said, teaching is very different, right? And it's also more about relating to the student. The thing is, the stronger the player you are, the less you're going to relate to a weaker player. Because in my case, for example, the last time I was in a point where I learned how to move a bishop, I'm definitely not going to remember that. Right?
Yeah.
So, or my first time experiencing what a pin was and what the struggles were, I obviously don't remember those things. So the thing is, it's more of a kind of a learning process, right? If you want to be a good teacher, some people are just natural at it, and some people are not so natural at it. I mean, that's just like usual for everything, right? But to eventually be a good teacher, I think the first thing is patience. Yeah, you can start by assuming that nothing is going to work. So what are you going to do if nothing works? So can you keep on changing your approach, keep on looking at different angles and work on it, rather than saying, the student is bad, right? The main thing is if you can start thinking in such a way that how can I tweak my teaching to fit the needs? Then you're going to be a good coach as one. And the second thing that I also mentioned is that there is no one answer that fits all, right? This is actually the biggest mistake I did as a coach. So I can relate more to it. Yeah, the simplest example actually I can give is that I did not grow up playing for results. So I played for the game. I played for, to basically improve. So the larger picture was more important to me. So when I initially worked with students, I thought this is the right attitude. There is no question about the other things. To me, the idea was you should not focus on results. You should focus on the larger picture. To some extent, I still believe in that. But as I grew as a coach, what I realized is there are some students who are going to kind of get the best by actually focusing on the result. Okay. Right? Again, there is no one. If Kasparov's coach taught him when he was a boy, listen, don't bother too much about winning. You will not have a Kasparov. This is the point, right? He's a clear example to say that he absolutely wants to win. Magnus is a great example, right? You can see that they just hate losing. They just cannot, right? And that is the biggest drive for them. So this was the biggest learning thing that I could say that I had that kind of made me think, wait, I am projecting what worked for me and what was right for me to my students. And it just might not work. And that's one of the things I would say is really the most important thing for the coaching community, because everybody gets to a point with their experience and they project that. It's almost like parenting, right? Correct. You kind of project what you didn't do or what you wanted to do onto your kids. So the same way you kind of have an experience and you say, oh, this is right, that was wrong. When I grew up, this is what I did. When I studied, this is what I did. And then we start projecting that onto our students. And that to me is a disconnect. Your students need solutions based on who they are, not based on who you are. So that's the one thing I would, yeah.
Okay. So I'm sure you've coached many students over the years. So what do you think are a few expectations that parents should not have from their kids? Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a very, very interesting or important question, I would say. I think there is always a huge disconnect in parents, and usually my job is to make sure I communicate that. So as a parent, the first thing is you need to understand the level of commitment and the work and things that goes into achieving something like this, right? Some of the simplest misunderstandings that I've had is that people expect like a trajectory like this as a chess player. Like my kid was 500, he went to 1,000 in 1 year. He went to 1,200 in 2 years. And then now their expectation is every year, right? You're going to be Magnus Carlsen. So I think that's the problem. I think there is literally no one I know, maybe other than Magnus, who has had a graph like this, right? Everyone hits a plateau, right? Everyone sometimes takes a dip, right? And so the realistic part of what the chess world is sometimes difficult to understand. I think it's easier to understand if you are involved in any sport in general. So it's easier. But the problem is a lot of times parents are not involved in a real, a professional sport, or they're more involved in a professional world rather than a professional sport. So that becomes a little more difficult to understand what this process is going to be, how difficult it is, right? The biggest problem I've noticed is like, take a beginner example. I've seen several times parents standing and watching that the kid blundered a piece, right? And they are decent players, they lose their mind, right? They lose their mind, say, oh, you know what? That bishop was under attack. He knows how to move the bishop. He knows how the pieces attack. He has done like thousands of examples. He should not have done that, right? So this comes back to why I play chess, right? So I tell them, listen, if you play chess, you'll know I blunder like that. I mean, okay, I'm not losing direct attacks, but for a grandmaster level, I have blundered where I make a move, spending 20 minutes, and I'm watching the next move my opponent is going to play. The level is still different, but if I kind of dilute it down, the point is still that I miss the very next move my opponent is going to play after thinking for 20 minutes, right? It's not very common, but it can still happen, right? So the problem is not being able to relate to actually sitting down and playing a game. So sometimes my wife is women international master Anuprita Patil. So she always used to have the suggestion, say that make parents play. The experience, right, is when they really understand how difficult it is to put all of those things together. You know how the bishop moves, you know how to capture, you know what a pin is, you know what a double attack is, right? When you bring all of that at the same time in there, not easy. So the most difficult thing for parents to understand is that your kid is actually going to make mistakes in a game.
Correct.
Like, people don't actually think about it. If you bring me a game where your kid did not make mistakes or a student did not make mistakes, that's what is abnormal, right? Yeah. That doesn't happen. So the question only is: are the mistakes silly? Are the mistakes appropriate for their level? And parents are almost never equipped to answer this question. Only a coach can answer this, right? If I know a 1500 blundered a piece in one move, I can easily tell them, listen, it's a one move tactic. You should not have made this mistake. Now, the same 1500 lost a piece because there is a 3 or 4 move sequence. I'm going to say, listen, you have to improve your calculation, right? You have to see a little bit more, but you're working hard. You're on the right track, but you have to work a little bit more. Now, if they miss a one move tactic, I'm going to say maybe it's because of concentration or something like that, right? Because now I'm going to say this is beneath your level.
Yeah.
So my biggest advice for parents is, if you are looking at a mistake, right? First thing you have to understand is you're supposed to expect a mistake from your students, probably not one, many in their games. To differentiate the mistakes that are silly and avoidable from the mistakes that they're supposed to do for their level, you need a coach.
Yeah.
So don't take those calls by yourself. Let the coach be the guide to tell you on those things. As a parent, you play a very important role outside of the chess world. Right? There are so many things that you have to do for a kid to be successful. No one's going to be successful just because they learn just chess moves, right? So parents do a lot of important things outside of the chess world, but judging the chess mistakes, I would say you have to know what your limitations are. If you're not able to understand what the mistake is, you have to take advice from the coach. You really have to let go on that particular one.
Nicely put. So have you seen anyone who had no interest in the sport and then somehow went on to become a great player? And if that's possible, what can coaches do to make this happen?
Yeah, I've seen that. I mean, it's not as frequent, but I have seen that some player who accidentally starts playing a little bit, that initially is very reluctant to start or do something, and then they just love chess. But I mean, not go on to become the strongest. I wouldn't put it that way, but to get to a point where they really, really enjoy chess, and they play at a very decent level, and stuff like that. So I do see that, but probably not that common.
Right. I mean, chess is one of those games where, when I remember reading somewhere, like, you work for really long hours to make incremental progress. So, I mean, that is something for somebody who doesn't know chess, it's difficult to, understand.
Exactly. It's a painful process. Yeah, you have to work, and then you don't actually see the results right away.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see the results after years. So that's how it is. I remember actually playing a training game with actually Ramesh, so many years ago in Haryan's house.
Okay.
And I know professional players will have several experiences like this, but this is my personal experience. I played a training game, and 5 years later, I played in the World Juniors, in which Mamadiyaro played a game against. I was playing against Mamadiyaro. He was like really strong already at that time, and I was able to use a move that I played against Ramesh. It took me 5 years for that to actually show up in a game. That's the level, yeah. And that's for me, who's not even that professional. I mean, think of all these top players who are actually preparing like millions of novelties, right? They're sitting with their whole arsenal waiting. Someone's going to get caught someday, but until then, they're like patiently working and waiting. Yeah,
So,
long process.
a lot of heavy stuff we have discussed. I didn't expect it to be very intense. So, like, what about tournaments? I mean, what do you think? How tournaments will change in the future? Because right now nothing is happening in physical mode. And yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah,
before we
question,
move to
right?
rapid fire? Yeah,
Yeah, this is a tough question. Oh, we have a rapid fire. Okay.
that'll have a lot of
Okay.
Indian flavor though. So yeah,
Interesting. So, but yeah, I think projecting or like kind of trying to see what's going to happen with chess world is a little tricky. I frankly don't understand what's going to happen. I think it's tough to understand because right now, for example, US chess players, they have an online USCF rating. They're all playing in online tournaments. But unfortunately, online tournaments, we all know that cheating is a big problem.
yeah,
Online cheating. So there's a huge surge in online playing. And with that, there's been a huge surge in online cheating. So with our students too, we have been addressing it a lot. So this is like a mixed problem. So what happens is I try to convince one of my students to play in a tournament, but at the same time, I have to convince them to also understand that could be cheating, and they still have to take it in a positive way to say, listen, sometimes unfortunate things happen to me. That's all it is, right? If I end up playing a cheater and cheater beats me, that's not the reason for me to stop playing tournaments. And that is tough with young kids. I think with more mature kids, it's easy to convince them to say, listen, it's unfortunate. It's not going to happen all the time. The chances of you playing a cheater is still like low, right? It's not like, because the number of players in general have grown a lot, and that the cheater has grown. So that balance is tough. I've been trying to figure out how I can actually suggest that balance, because some of my students that I know just don't want to play because of cheating, right? They're waiting for over the board tournaments. So I'm like, okay, I want to play over the board tournaments too, but I don't know how long it's going to be. And then if it's going to be so out of match practice, is it going to be good for you? It's going to take a lot more time for you. So I'm kind of trying to work with my students to say, embrace the change. That's all it is. We have to, pick up and run with this. There are going to be problems, and we have to deal with it. Unfortunately, actually, even that I talked about cheating quickly, I also want to address it because it's the most important problem we have right now. And I've had too many conversations for my liking on this, unfortunately, with my students, with my own students. And it's mostly not the question of whether are they capable of doing. It seems to be more like they are enticed into doing it. I mean, they feel like, oh, wait, nobody's watching, nobody's going to find out. Why not? Right? So I'm not talking about title players and the like money tournaments where they cheat. That's a different kind of a problem. I'm talking about the scholastic problems where students and kids cheat for no reason, no incentive. They're not getting money, they're not getting prizes, and yet they're cheating, right?
yeah,
And sometimes I wonder, what is the incentive? I don't understand. You're not even winning any money. This is like a casual tournament, or even in class. I'd be teaching a class and someone wants to do it. So these are soft incentives where they are saying something because they want to be the best person in the class, right? And so my only message would be that first thing is you have to be preemptive. You don't want to wait for your student or your child to cheat, right? So I would say I have started going on the direction a little bit. It's not about the character of the student. It's just that someone who has never done anything is fantastic is still possible to do such things because the cost is very low, right?
Yeah.
They think that, oh, nobody's going to find me. I'm just using this engine here and nobody's going to catch me. They don't really understand how chess.com works, right? Or how leeches works. They catch cheaters a lot, and so students don't even know that. And the second thing is how it really affects the chess community. They're really pulling down the good players. People who want to play are demotivated, find it unfair, very rightly so, because of this particular problem. So in general, I would say talk to your students even before this happens, right? So we do that all the time in our academy now. We have started just having these general discussions before classes. We spend 5-10 minutes just talking about, listen, cheating is a problem. You should not do it. If your friends do it, you're not helping them by not supporting them, right? Because we need to build a chess community. I would say all the coaches should take this responsibility and parents should take this responsibility. A lot of times, right, parents don't even know when, like, for example, a kid will tell me, my chess.com account got changed, right? This is the first suspicious question already for me, right? I'm like, why? Why did your chess.com account get changed? So, and the parents would tell me, oh, nothing. I think they had some issues. He tried to sort it out. And then he just created a new account. I'm like, no, you have to find out what happened, right? Because chess.com never bans an account if they're not so sure about it. If they banned an account, it's 100%, almost 100% sure that the person was cheating. So I have had actually lots of cases where chess.com is something I know personally, so I can talk more about it on other sites, where they don't actually ban someone, even though I know it's my student and I think he's cheating, right? Or she's cheating. But chess.com wouldn't ban them because they don't have enough information. So if chess.com bans an account, they're cheating for sure, pretty much. If they didn't ban an account, they could still be cheating, you don't know. So this is the kind of take we have to have. So parents need to be aware, right? If the student says, my chess.com account got closed for whatever reason, please check what it is. Don't let them simply go say, oh, start a new account and play. You have to figure out why an account got banned, right? So this awareness, I think, is extremely important for coaches too. Sometimes coaches don't know that. They think, oh, some technical issue, something happened, right? And they're like, oh, fine. Okay, you have a new account. Everything is okay. No, and the bigger problem for me is if a kid cheats once and gets away with it, that's a really big problem. He's going to do it again. She's going to do it again. And we really need to address that as a big community. I know I went off on a tangent about cheating, but this is a really important problem, and I want to make sure I address it.
Yeah, it's important because I think when I could sense that when you started playing, it was more towards the love of the game, and that's how you mentioned it more than once. I think it's not for the result; it's about improving oneself. And,
exactly.
If people can think on those lines, then these things we can avoid such conversations. But it's just an utopian thought. But I really don't know if that's a real.
Yeah, hopefully we can all reach that plane.
Yeah. Right. Great. So a lot of heavy stuff, little bit of so this we call it lightning round. Okay, you can answer in 1 or 2 words or sentence, anything. Okay. Right.
Okay.
So who do you like?
How much time do I have?
You have about 5 minutes. That's fine. I mean, you can answer.
No, I think it's per question.
Sorry.
So per question, is there a lightning round with the time limit?
No, I'm sure you answer pretty quickly. So yeah.
Okay.
Let's go for it. Right. So Magesh Chandran. So who do you like to be if you really want yourself, right, as a chess player?
Like my favorite chess player?
No, who would you like to be if you weren't yourself currently in the role that you are now? Yeah.
Well, my favorite, of course, Anand is the one on the top, and then Kramnik. So maybe Kramnik would be the more precise answer, yeah.
So you're a morning person or night person?
Right now, I would say morning. There were a few years ago when I graduated, I was a night person, I really.
So you graduated to become a morning person. Interesting.
Slowly, I'm getting old, basically, that's what it is.
Right. Netflix or Amazon Prime?
Netflix.
Your favorite TV series?
Oh, TV series, I have to say Seinfeld.
Seinfeld, it's my favorite too. I think many chess players watch Seinfeld.
Yeah, Seinfeld is a class apart in my opinion. I watch mainly sitcoms, so.
Same here. Right. So what's your all-time favorite movie?
There are plenty. What could I mention? Okay, let's say there's probably a list. I would say I can watch.
I didn't know it was a
Um,
difficult question, but yeah.
I know, but because there are too many, I'm thinking like Remember the Titans is one of my favorite. Few Good Men. What else? I mean, I like Back to the Future series. Yeah, I mean, I think there's too much. I don't know, but maybe Remember the Titans would be definitely somewhere in the top five. So we can live with that.
I was expecting a Tamil movie, but anyway, so it brings to my next question.
Well,
Rajnikant or
actually,
Kamal Hassan?
Rajinikanth and Tamil movie I have a lot actually. Yeah,
Okay.
but so Tamil movie I would say the Mauna Ragam would be one of my top. Probably we'll make top five, so we can stick with that.
Okay. Favorite actress?
Actually, my all-time number one in Tamil will be Bama Vijayam, Palachandar. It's a black and white classic, and I can watch that movie like 1,000 times. Bama Vijayam is basically a timeless thing. So because a lot of times you watch a movie that you used to find it very funny, and you realize that it's not funny anymore, right? But this kind of comedy is like that, yeah.
Your favorite actress?
Actress, are we talking about Tamil?
Yeah, let's go with it.
Tamil actress. I think Revati all time.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Indian cuisine or American?
Indian.
Right. Your type of music?
I have a wide variety of music, but it's tough to. I listen to a lot of music, so there are few things that I don't more than what I listen to, so it's tough. But let's say I will go with. I would go with maybe let's say two or three. Ilayaraja,
Okay.
right? Would be probably right there in the top thing. I also like classics, so I like some black and white stuff. But in general, I would probably prefer more tune than more melody than rock or like something like that. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned it. I mean, when I was a player, I used to say, so when I lose, it's Ilayaraja, okay? Like when I win, I'll probably go for something else. But yeah. Right. So food that you like cooking. The last word is important.
Oh, okay. So this is going to make my answer very easy. Dosa, because that's the only thing I can make.
Right.
And that too, I cannot make the batter. I can make the dosa if there is batter. So,
So what's your greatest fear?
greatest fear. Interesting. I would say maybe death.
Okay. Right. So a few chess questions, if I may. So who's okay? You already mentioned. So what is chess book that had a like profound influence on you? One or two books it could, not just one. It's okay.
Okay, so the Kasparov predecessors series, I actually haven't finished it, so I have to be honest. But whatever I read was extremely important to me. And the same thing, there is another book that Kasparov wrote. That's how chess imitates life, or was it life? How life imitates chess?
Chess, yeah.
Yeah. So I mixed it up. That's a pretty good book. I had a profound impact. And there is another book. I'm blanking. I think the author was Lars Bohansen. I forget the name. Fundamental something. I wish I remember it. Maybe, but the whole idea of that book was actually how. I mean, change the thinking a little bit to say that the subjective evaluation is what is more important than the objective evaluation. Like, for example, we always are trained to think this position is plus equals or equals plus or minus plus or something like that, right? And this book kind of opened my eye to kind of make me understand that it's actually not true, right? I can give you an equal position that you would probably lose in 10 moves because that's not the kind of equal position you like to play.
Correct.
So the evaluation is very subjective, right? I can actually go as a player who's playing black, I can go into a plus equals position because I just like that kind of position more than actually going to an equal position that I hate. So, I mean, it's a very kind of, again, opening your eye to say there's no one rule. So
Yeah.
I wish I know the name of the book exactly, but I don't remember.
It looks like an influence to your thinking a lot. So yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
So your favorite book outside the chess field?
outside the chess field, okay, I have, again, I would say there are plenty. Which one should I pick? I think I'm going to pick one that influenced me the most, Phantoms of the Brain. It's actually by V.S. Ramachandran. It's a very good book about, how your brain works. And yeah, it again is mind-boggling. I would definitely recommend. And actually, right now, I would say my biggest influencing book was Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. Richard Feynman was a theoretical physicist, and he worked as part of the Manhattan Project for the atomic bomb. And he was just a genius. The whole book talks about how learning is more fun rather than actually learning. So, like, you learn because you're curious. You learn because you want to learn something rather than you learn something else. So I would definitely recommend that book, Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, or the other one, Phantom in the Brain.
Yeah. That's just to get a sense of outside what are the variety of things that we do outside chess. That's my intention of asking these questions. Right. So one last
There is
question.
also, actually, I'll also add one book, which is like probably something that I've discussed with so much with my friends. Like, it's the Illusion of Free Will, or I think the book is just called Free Will.
Okay.
It is by Sam Harris, who's probably one of the top people that I listen to in podcasts and other things. But Free Will is a great book.
Right.
So, yeah, go on. You were saying something, Eric.
Yeah, I asked these just to get a sense of what actually we do outside chess, because there's a world outside. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. One last question before we close. So, what does success mean to you?
At this point, I think I'm a little wiser than I used to. I'm hoping that I will be more. Success at this point means to me as balance, because I feel like as I grew, I started realizing that no one thing is going to mean much if there is no proper balance between everything, right? Yeah, whether it's playing, whether it's teaching, whether it's business, whether it's family. I think what I notice is no matter how good something is, there's always going to be a swing on the other side. You work really hard on doing something, you're going to forget something else on the other side, and that's going to create a side effect on the other side. So to me, success right now, I would say, is balance, where I could live a peaceful life. And that's what it is. It doesn't matter. I don't think I can measure it with money or fame or anything else. I think if I can live a peaceful, happy life, and that's all that is. Yeah.
That's a fantastic way to end our conversation. Any conversation with chess player, finally some amount of philosophy will be there somehow. It doesn't matter how. Brother, it was great having you with us, Mahesh. Thank you so much for your time. I hope our viewers also find something useful. You want to say anything, and then we can close. Yeah.
No, thanks. It was fun. I think it was good chatting, and it's good to catch up with you after such a long time.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Chesslang.
Yeah, thank you. See you soon, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mahesh. Yeah, bye.
Bye.